Let's bring in Juan Williams, a Fox News political analyst, and Jonah Goldberg, editor-at-large for the National Review Online. He is also a Fox News contributor. President Obama over the weekend told our Bill O'Reilly, Juan, famously, that there is not a smidgen of corruption at the IRS involving its targeting of conservative groups. The question is quite simple. How does he know?
Well, what he said and what the White House said yesterday, John, was that so far what they have learned from the Justice Department investigation and what the FBI has turned up is nothing so far. So that's all they can say. So what the president said was that this is a matter of mismanagement, people not understanding the rules they were trying to enforce. And I believe the president said something to the effect that there was boneheaded actions taken by some IRS officials. But in terms of actual corruption, as Fox has reported, there's nothing been found yet by the FBI or Justice.
Well, maybe, Jonah, that's because the FBI hasn't looked. I mean, we know that a number of these organizations that were targeted by the IRS haven't even received a phone call from the FBI about what happened.
Yeah, we know the investigation was slow-walked. Remember when the head of the FBI was asked who's heading this investigation, and he couldn't give an answer to Congress because he actually didn't know not too long ago. And the person who has been in charge of the investigation is an Obama donor. And it's a funny thing to do if the president thinks that there's not a smidgen of corruption. Why would you put this person in charge if you have nothing to worry about? Also, why would Lois Lerner plead the fifth if there's not a smidgen of corruption? I don't know if there's actually any corruption. There may not be. My suspicion is that essentially the IRS has become politicized all on its own and just simply thinks it's a job to go after conservatives in ways that it's not to go after liberals.
Yeah, Juan, let's take our viewers back to some of those electric moments on Capitol Hill when Lois Lerner, who formerly worked at the she worked at the IRS at the time, was called in to testify. Listen.
While I would very much like to answer the committee's questions today, I've been advised by my counsel to assert my constitutional right not to testify or answer questions related to the subject matter of this hearing. After very careful consideration, I've decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today.
Juan, if the president is right, if the problem here was a bunch of boneheaded mistakes, I mean, you can't go to jail for being boneheaded. I don't think you can even be sued for being boneheaded. So why does she take the fifth?
I think she didn't want to get caught up in what Sander Levin, the congressman from Michigan, described earlier in our piece, John, as a political frenzy, which is that, the sense is that Republicans have a desire to politicize this issue. They see it as a matter of unfair treatment. I think that, by the way, Republicans and Democrats do not want a political IRS going after anybody, enemy hunting for either side. Obviously, power changes hands in this town. That's a bad thing. But I think for Lois Lerner, the idea was, why subject yourself to that kind of political beating in front of the Congress and the national audience on TV? And she decided to take the fifth.
But I guess the point you were making, Jonah, is that the IRS, in your view, has become politicized to the point where one point of view sort of becomes the norm. I mean, it's not like anybody thinks if there were a Republican administration taking over, all of a sudden the IRS would be examining all of the records of liberal groups in this country.
Right. I mean, the union that represents most of the workers at the IRS and the Treasury Department, I think, gives 94% of its donations to Democratic candidates. And, the idea that the Republicans trying to politicize this when it's the IRS that has attacked political groups that are critical of the president, I think puts the cart before the horse. At the end of the day, also, this idea that no one wants a political IRS, yes and no. Right now the Treasury Department is trying to codify many of the things that were done ad hoc by the IRS and come up with these new rules that put a lot more pressure on largely conservative-leaning 501c4 groups, which has people like Mitch McConnell screaming bloody murder because they're basically saying, look, what you're trying to do is take what was a scandal and just simply make it the new rule for the bureaucracy. And that's going to be a big fight in these hearings today.
All right. So, Juan, are we learning anything new from these hearings? I mean, it doesn't seem like the investigation of the IRS targeting of conservative groups has really gone anywhere.
No, I don't think we're learning much today so far, John. I don't know what's to come. I just want to go back to something that Jonah touched on. I think that really is at stake right now, which is, are they going to codify laws to try to make things more direct and so that everybody understands it in a way that could disadvantage, let's say, the Tea Party groups? Remember, the Tea Party groups are the ones that have been screaming murder over the way that they were treated. There were some liberal groups that were also exposed to these kind of rough treatment by the IRS, but it's principally the conservative groups. And now what you're hearing from Mitch McConnell and others is, hey, wait a second, if you tighten up the laws in this way, all of the young grassroots groups that are just coming up on the Republican side are the ones that are likely to be hurt more directly. And so that's why I think Republicans, again, feel that the IRS actions are detrimental to their political interest. But, you know, when I was saying, and then Jonas said he thinks the IRS is politicized, I would hope that the IRS is not politicized.
Yeah, I think we all do. It's a question of, you know, if it
I would hope the IRS doesn't exist.
Okay. Well,
that's the way to depoliticize it. Get rid of it.
Amen to that. All right. Juan Williams, Jonah Goldberg, thank you both.